Okay, I begin. I begin, but I'm still waiting for a little arrow to show up, and already is recording the Zoom system. I really hate this, but what can I do? I cannot move forward unless that little arrow shows up at the bottom, and I really don't know how to activate it, and I'm exasperated because I'm waiting for it, and without it I cannot. Okay, it shows up, but I don't see the arrow. Strange. Let's see, maybe I can activate the moving forward without that arrow. I already ruined the presentation because, this is not professional to start with, with this neurosis relating to a little arrow which doesn't show up. It still didn't show up. So Sir James Fraser Stirling was a British architect, as you can see, born the 22nd of April, 1926, and died in 1992, was a British architect. Stirling worked in partnership with James Gowan from 1956 to 1963, then with Michael Wilford from 1971 until 1992. As I mentioned, he did receive the Pritzker Prize in Architecture and was a very important British architect, and you can see he became a Sir. I saw somewhere, this expression that he is the Francis Bacon of British architecture. In my opinion, and I place that question mark, I think this phrasing is a little bit problematic. Francis Bacon was indeed a very important British painter, but I wouldn't really see a resemblance between the spirit of the paintings of Francis Bacon and the spirit of the architecture of James Stirling. This was the man, and here he is again. Truly a brilliant architect. Unfortunately, he had the unluck of receiving in his office Leon Krier, who was a young man at the time. And in my opinion, Leon Krier and postmodernism affected the works of James Stirling dramatically. Now, of course, he is also responsible for allowing himself to be affected by Leon Krier and postmodernism. I'm not trying to excuse him. Far from it. But I did attend a lecture by him at Columbia University, and it was actually very shortly before he died, in fact. Yeah, he died in 1992. So I think in 1991, and I even wrote a text apropos of James Stirling's lecture, which if you want, I could send it to you. Some drawings by James Stirling. An interesting architect and a skillful architect, a talented architect. This is a sketch for an important museum in Stuttgart, which he built, and we are going to see the work. Now we'll see the early works when he worked together with James Gowan, and perhaps I should have had pictures of James Gowan too, because I think they made an excellent partnership, and I don't want to be unfair. So they worked together from 1956 to 1963. It is a picture with him. I didn't look at while James Stirling is tracing lines there on the drafting board. They were young, or younger. Anyway, 1958, flats on Ham Common with James Gowan. They worked together. I like these buildings very much. They show skill already, and the handling of materials is proper. The structure in concrete and then brick walls, and it has a vigorous honesty. Nothing, fluid or spectacular or exotic, no, but they are good buildings, good blocks of flats. and nothing wrong with that. James Stirling and I forgot the first name of it. Let me look actually. James as well, yes, they're both James. James Gowan and James Stirling. I want to tell that to say that mid-century, mid-20th century, there was often an excellent architecture being built. Maybe because there was a certain optimism, you know, the Second World War ended, so it was like a new beginning. Also, if you are interested in church architecture, because we talked earlier about it, in Germany and Austria and Switzerland, there was a very fine church architecture, modern architecture being built, excellent architecture. In fact, I imagine some books were written about it. If not, I feel like doing it, because that architecture, you know, modern through and through, for church, you know, for the church function, for sacred buildings. At that time, mid-20th century, was excellent. But this is housing. But it's still very high quality, and yet, again, I don't even think these are expensive blocks of flats, you know, like intended for an elite. No, I don't know who this person is here. Anyway, also what we see here is access to the apartments from a corridor, which could have been exterior. I don't know if here it is exterior. It looks like it is, but then I see the glass on both sides. It's very easy to do good apartment buildings with an exterior corridor, which also gives the chance for cross ventilation for the apartments, which is a quality always, and at the time of climate change, even more so. Anyway, James Gowan and James Stirling, we are going to see some great modern buildings by them. Now, this one is one of them, and one of the best known, the Leicester University, 1959. So it's more than 60 years old. The Faculty of Engineering. It's a great building. It's a great building. You know, if you love modernism, you cannot, you know, avoid liking this building. It's audacious, it's clear, it's structural, it's sculptural, it's everything, and it shows clearly the talent of James Stirling together with James Gowan. It's a you know, a building dedicated to learning. It's a university, but it has this vigor of an industrial building somehow. And so that it crossed the frontier between educational and, you know, production, so to speak. Sorry about this salami thing. It's one of the famous buildings, this building, the engineering university, the University of Engineering at Leicester University, the engineering building at this university in Leicester. You know, this is a book published just about this building by Phaidon Press. The vehicle of the future, the bicycle, in some parts of the world, even of the present, and even of some past, no, like Scandinavian countries and so on. A great invention, the bicycle, because it doesn't pollute, you exercise, it's healthy, it doesn't need, you know, a fuel. It's true, it's for one person, maybe two, through, you know, an extravagant model, maybe even three, but that's it. The Camberwell School Assembly Hall in London, 1961. Here it is. Nothing, outrageous or anything, but still an interesting building, still architecture. I mean, look at the buildings around it. This stands out still after 60 years. True architecture can only be creative. That's it. If it's not creative, it's not architecture, it's building. Well, as an architect, you choose. You want to do architecture or you want to do just a building. If you want to do just a building, then, you can do so. But I'm not sure you truly deserve being called an architect. Walter Gropius, the founder of the Bauhaus, said, and I'm not sure he was totally right, but he said, architecture begins where the work of the engineer ends. I don't quite agree with him, but it's true that, architecture goes beyond structure, beyond the building. And I think a building becomes architecture through art when it assumes some kind of an artistic side or element, or I don't know how to call it. 1964, St. Andrews University, Andrew Melville Hall of Residence, a larger building. A creative architect works with different angles. It's creation. No, you create something new, and when there is creativity, you smell it, so to speak. You see it. It's different. Creativity has to do with difference, because if you do a work which is not different from many others or others, that cannot be truly called creativity. All the creative architects, and in fact, I'm redundant because again, an architect is supposed to be creative, because if he or she is not creative, is not an architect. I know there are architects who work in bureaucracy, for the government, for various institutions. I'm talking here about the practicing architects who are active within the field of what architecture stands for, even if they don't have an office. Like, for example, Lévi-Strauss, a force in recent architecture, and one very loved and admired by many young architects, and not only young. He died in 2012. He said, you don't need an office to be creative in architecture. He himself, he created a so-called visionary architecture. Nobody asked him to do those drawings, many beautiful drawings. He did them because he had a pressing desire to express. Like Louis Kahn said, spirit in will to express can make the great sun seem small. That's the source, that's the catalyst, the desire to express. If you have that desire, that urging desire, pressing desire within you, in your soul, in your imagination, in your mind, you better let it out. Like Stephen Hall said, if there is idealism in you, bring it out, bring it forward, of course. And if you cannot build, if you don't have clients, if for who knows what reasons, you don't have public relations, you are not connected, you can still express yourself through drawings, through modeling, digitally or manually, working for competitions and so on. Nobody can truly stop you from expressing your love of architecture. But when we talk about love, we talk about the soul, no? I mean, You know, it belongs to the soul. If you have that within you, you are lucky. And you should never give up on it. It's the most precious thing that you have. Unfortunately, you know, education often kills that love, or is trying its best to kill that love. And that's a big, 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 big problem. And that's why today I sent that message, you know, in a way, crucifixion is could be connected, of course, through some kind of poetic license to correctura, you know. Those who those who crucified Christ wanted to correct him and punish him for his courage, his audacity, his love at humankind. The same way schools of architecture punish a student often for having a tumultuous love or feelings for architecture. And it's a great loss. In a way, indeed, the student is crucified, you know, metaphorically speaking. Let's hope it will never happen, you know, factually. Cambridge University, the Faculty of History, 1968, the tumultuous year 1968, when the students fought for a new world, and when you know, there were great strikes, students' manifestations in Paris, in London, in the United States, for a world without wars, make love but not war. That's what they kept saying. Of course, things are not so simple, but in essence, they were right, you know. Then the music in London and you know, Great Britain erupted. Beautiful music, energetic, you know, that's music. So look at this building in Cambridge, again, a very old and prestigious university. Some might even describe maybe, you know, very stable and maybe even conformist in a way, but you see, they welcomed, and even Oxford University, I mean, Oxford is Cambridge, you know, invited Zaha and other innovative architects to build for them. So this building was built for Cambridge by James Gowan and James Stirling and James Gowan. I don't know if we should change the order, but it probably doesn't matter. It's a good building. It's a good building. And again, the courage to embrace the new, to promote the new is a good thing, you know, because how else are you to move forward if you don't promote the new? 1968. James Stirling and James Gowan. James Stirling, as I said, laureate of the Pritzker Prize. I forgot exactly in what year, maybe 1981. It's possible. Anyway, but look at the plans and look at the sections. You know, they are clear, but they are clearly creative. You know, you can understand the creative project, a creative building from the first sketches sometimes, you know, like you look at the sketches of John Woodson for the opera in Sydney. You look here, these drawings, they are essentially, you know, diagrammatic drawings, but you feel the spirit of architecture and the creativeness of the architect or architects. That's when architecture is beautiful, really, and it is beautiful. But in order for it to be beautiful, it has to be creative. Otherwise, it's not architecture. It's something else. Maybe building, or I don't know, but not architecture. I said this before, and allow me to repeat it. Paul Valéry, the important French poet, wrote a little book called Eupalinos ou l'architecte. Eupalinos, or the architect. And he said that there are three kinds of builders. One who places a stone above another stone, that's a builder. Then you have one who places a stone above another stone and makes them talk. He is the master builder. But the third one places a stone above another stone and makes them sing. Yes, sing. His name is Eupalinos, or the architect. Now, maybe this language is too poetical for us today, cynical as we are, but I think Paul Valéry was right. When you make the stones sing, and they don't have to be only stones, of course, it's about matter, materials. If you make them sing, in other words, you transform inanimate matter into an animated one by spirit, by talent, by inspiration, then you deserve the name Eupalinos. That's how he called that the architect. I don't know how he arrived at the name Eupalinos, but it doesn't matter. We can replace that name Eupalinos with our own names if we deserve to do so. And it's really simple. You have to be creative. You have to put your own soul, your own imagination into the work. If you give birth to a project, to a building, just like a couple gives birth to a baby, it's the same thing. You generate a new life. That crying baby, when he leaves the womb, is a creation, is life itself. And that's how architecture should be too, I think. The Queen's College, the Florey building, 1971, Oxford, even here you see, non-conventionality. You see the building kind of like an organism, and again, structure doesn't have to be, just horizontals and verticals. Here you don't have, the typical vertical column, an axonometric and, model or a rendering, whatever it is. And here is the building. James Stirling and James Gowan. Or maybe by that time he didn't work any longer with James Gowan, I think. But again, you see that James Stirling was excellent at organizing the masses, organizing the functions and expressing them in a rather sincere way, architectonically or architecturally. But the building still stands properly, against the passage of time. It's still interesting and alive. Unfortunately, James Stirling changed, and we are going to arrive at his later works, which in my opinion are not so good, and they are not so good because he was affected by some even called it, classicism or neoclassicism. He was affected by postmodernism, and I think also by the presence of Leo Krier in his office, who probably had a strong enough personality to influence him. But again, I don't want to excuse him. Olivetti Training Center, 1972. It's clear. On the left, we have the old. On the right, we have the new. That's it. And the new is new indeed, as it should be. How else are we to assert our lives? Just repeating what was previously? But yes, we do have to know the past in order to transcend it, perhaps. This is a very, high-tech building in a way. It's for Olivetti, so it has a technological component. And it looks like it indeed. And you see the dialogue, even the dialectics between the new and the old are fine. He didn't have to mimic the same architecture as the old one. No, he brought in one which was distinctly new. So you have here harmony through contrast. This was demolished, 1976, Southgate social housing, that is inexpensive housing. And it's too bad it was demolished, you know. Well, some people probably didn't like it, but even this is an original architectural work. You see, even for a program like social housing, you can do architecture. In fact, I think for a true architect, cannot be otherwise. Really, it cannot be otherwise. You have to create something that is alive, that is new, that is interesting. Well, you know, some people might say this is kind of a brutalist work. You have to understand this was a work with a low budget. But even with a low budget, he created architecture. Now, if people liked it or didn't like it, you know, this happens. There were important buildings demolished in the history of the world or in the history of architecture. I regret it was demolished. Maybe it needed a little bit of, no, I would not have destroyed them in any way. And I think if these buildings would have been just like this in the present, they would not have been demolished, because it's not sustainable at all to demolish things which obviously structurally were just sound, very sound. You know, maybe a little bit of weakening of the masculinist aesthetics, you know, maybe bring in some softening of the image, maybe bring in ivy, and they would have been fine. I'm absolutely sure the plans were fine. The functioning of the apartments was fine. People, there was around that time some kind of adverse you know, perception of brutalismus, of you know, but now brutalism is back in fashion, actually. It's sad that this building, okay, maybe it was not the most inspired work by James Stirling, but I personally, if I had the chance, I could have made a proposal to keep the buildings and to, you know, maybe bring in color, maybe change a little bit of the proportion of certain things through just through almost ornamental work. Don't touch structure. It could have been done. The potential was here. And they prefer to demolish it. Sad, very, very sad. Stuttgart, now we arrive at the work which I mentioned, is an important work by him, and by now he was already troubled, so to speak, by the wings of postmodernity, but this is a good building. Neue Staatsgalerie, the new gallery of art in Stuttgart, 1984. I like this building. This is the plan. And you'll see in this building Stirling's ability to negotiate between various forms to create a whole of a hybrid encounter between you know, disparate things. And this is not easy to do. But look at it. It's almost it almost has some elements of deconstruction, and actually deconstruction came into being not much later. You know, Patrick Schumacher said that there were two intermediate, I forgot how he called them, transitory styles or so, at the end of the 20th century. The first one was postmodernism, and then deconstructivism. Here we see an anticipation a little bit of deconstructivism, because it has a certain fragmentarism that is obvious. But also the walls that James Stirling built refer rather to postmodernism, not so much to deconstruction. But the fragmentation is almost deconstructivist. the walls, this is not the kind of wall the deconstructivist would build. But what is interesting is also the use of color. You know, these kind of colors are not so common. Well, now they are beginning to be in many projects published on Sucker Punch Daily. But at that time, and in general, these are not who would use pink in architecture, not very often. Here we see clearly, flirtation with history, with these rather funny columns. There is already a certain sympathy from James Stirling towards what we call history. But there are interesting things even here, if you look at this detail, this block that is a little bit off, you see from the shadow, as if it's a commentary on the ephemerality in a way of the wall, of the structure, like you see here. It's a capricious way of suggesting the possible coming apart of the building in time. It's interesting, it's creative again. And you see at the bottom, I am sure these were planned. They didn't just were left here or anything. It's a commentary, on maybe an expression of a little bit of melancholia, I don't know. So this is in Stuttgart. This work you can see, you take the bus. If you don't want to fly, you can take the plane, and it might be even less expensive than the bus. And I don't know, 1-2 hours you are in Stuttgart, and you can see not only this building, but also the Weissenhof colony. The Stuttgart has important architectural works. Again in Cambridge, but this time in Massachusetts, Harvard University, the Fogg Museum, 1984. Here, postmodernism is more obviously present. Still a little bit transformed, but not radically. It's still, he seemed to have some doubts at that time about which way to go. You see, this building is at the first sight almost a typical, kind of modernistic building, but here we see something else. The monumentality of this entrance here. But still, interesting. So this is at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, this time, not Great Britain. The Tate Britain, the Clore Galleries and Extension, 1987 in London. I personally like more their earlier works. I say there when he worked together with James Gowan, and even the first years after they separated. (1997). So he died in 1992, and this was built 5 years afterwards. It's an interesting building, but still, I don't know. I still find it interesting. I usually don't like postmodern architecture at all, but this one still has vigor, and you can tell, he was a talented designer, a talented architect. It doesn't matter where you look at, towards the building, it still has something to offer that is, interesting, enticing, even the plan of the building. James Stirling. I think he received the Pritzker Prize in 1981. And I could be wrong. I didn't double check. Anyway, look at the plan. It is interesting. It is enticing. It is exciting. You know, there are things that perhaps John Ruskin was right. The most beautiful things are those that are the most useless. And he gave as an example the peacock's tail and the lily, the plant, the flower. And even here, you say perhaps the most interesting things, the most beautiful even, are those that are almost useless. Why? Because playfulness is an organic part of creativity. When you work and you play and you work, you combine the two, and then the parts of the building that are the most interesting are those that in a way are the least responsible or the most irresponsible, because they are playful. They assert a raison d'etre which is not lucrative or functional or measurable even. It is about freedom. That's it. God asserted his freedom, when he designed the wings of the butterfly or the tail of the peacock, or the trees in the spring when they flower up and so on. The architect could do the same. The architect can and should, I would say, assert his or her freedom through playfulness. And then you get interesting things like here. That's it. And I'm a little bit tired, but I guess I should continue now with the other two architects. Let's talk now about Craig Ellwood. Talking about playfulness, this man was rather something, because I don't remember very well all the details, but I knew more last year when I talked about him again. But I think there are even some doubts if he is the author of this. He had an architecture office, but and then his last 20 years of life, he was a painter in Italy, and an interesting man, nevertheless. Craig Ellwood, 1922, 1992. So he died at 70. Let's read a little bit about him. Craig Ellwood was an influential Los Angeles-based modernist architect whose career spanned the early 50s through the mid-1970s. Although untrained as an architect, so there, I knew something. Untrained as an architect, Ellwood fashioned a persona and career through equal parts of a talent for good design, self-promotion, and ambition. He was recognized professionally for fusing of the formalism of Mies van der Rohe with the informal style of California modernism. And he was quite successful. But some think that there was something of a charlatan in him. But I don't know, sometimes the frontier between genius and charlatanism or charlatan is thin. I think he was a genuine good architect with some, curious idiosyncrasies. Let's see. This was the man. And he does look, I usually like people who smoke. Not because I also smoked many years ago, but I gave up many years ago as well. It's just that I think people who smoke, sometimes at least, I ask myself, why do people smoke? I imagine that someone who smokes is because that someone has a fire within, and by smoking, at least, can externalize some fume. And what else could be the reason that one smokes? I don't know. Let's move forward. Here he is. He was some kind of a playboy. He loved expensive, exotic, eccentric cars. An interesting man. He was certainly playful, but he built some good buildings. The Hunt House. Here it is, split into two parts near the ocean. He had his office in California, Craig Ellwood. Even this is provocative. I mean, this is the elevation of the house towards the street. I would say it's not bad, and I actually suspect he had a dark side. And you'll see one of his major works, university campus, a university that is, well, factually black, but also maybe a little bit metaphorically as well. Even this one, is rather, you say, misanthropic. Where are the windows? Where is the door? Where this doesn't look like a house, but it is a house. And as you can see, a comfortable house, a modern house, a clean house, a clear house, a functionalist house, you name it. It's a fine building. Craig Ellwood, who never studied architecture and who I don't even know how he, how he managed to build. This is the plan. Very simple, no? Large living room, the kitchen here. So here is the day part of the house. This is the night part of the house, the bedrooms. And here you have, I don't know, a bathroom and maybe an additional, toilet or bathroom with shower or whatever. Very simple. But I don't know what's here. The garages. So the facade towards the street are the two garages. But interesting, no? Still, of course, it occupies a significant amount of space, dividing the house in three zones with this circulation in the center. But it's very clear and I think aesthetically interesting. So these are the garages. I mean, even as garages, they are unusual because they are aesthetically, convincing. They are rather mysterious. Two boxes, and with this mysterious kind of, relation, liaison between them, so to speak. I don't know. I think very interesting. Very interesting house. I continue to repeat myself. And look at the facade towards the ocean. Not bad. Well, sometimes I guess it pays not to study in a school architecture, as he did or didn't. Who taught him architecture? I don't know. Who taught Joseph Brodsky, the Nobel Prize laureate of poetry, the youngest actually poetry? He himself said when he was asked about the police, by the police in St. Petersburg, why doesn't he work? And he said, I work, I write poetry and I make translations. And then they asked him, because they wanted to send him to Siberia or somewhere because he was a parasite. And who gave you the right to write poetry? Did you study in a school, in a university? And he said, I didn't. I thought the right was given to me by God. So I guess God gave the right to Craig Ellwood to build. Now, of course, in some countries, if not many countries, you need a right for signature. How he got that right in California, I don't know. But obviously, he was a skillful architect, and this building is a clear proof. Not bad. Craig Ellwood. Now let's see, where is his house here on this. I used to know, but now I can't see it. It's one of these, maybe here. Yeah, I think it's here on Malibu Road. Not bad. Bravo, Craig Ellwood. Yeah, here it is. That's the building. You know, with the simplest means, he made architecture, you know, placing the two garages, you know, like some mysterious boxes or even chapels, you know, it's something religious about the opaqueness and the, you know, apparent misanthropy. You wouldn't think they are garages. And this facade is interesting itself in a different way. Mid-century glass house by Craig Ellwood hits the market in Los Angeles for $3 million. So if you get the money, but I guess in the meantime it was sold. I I made this presentation 1 or 2 years ago, so the announcement was valid then, but I'm sure by now it's gone. A lot of glass, of course, but you know, at that time there was no concern for electrical bills. You know, the country had money, and the people who build such houses had the money. They didn't care that the electrical bill was big. Today is a different story, but it's a nice building. It's a good building. And again, that kind of clear thinking, functionally thinking, clean, smooth, convincing modernity or modernism. Fine, good work. Again, Craig Ellwood, who in another country might not have built anything because he didn't have the right for signature, because he never studied architecture. Rosenhaus, 1961. Even this house, you know, the distribution of the rooms is very clear, very functional. Yes, it's a generous house, it's a big house, but even the plan itself is nice, you know, and even here with the garage and maybe a pool here, a swimming pool. Is this some kind of a modern replica to La Rotonda by Palladio? Because you see it has 4 stairs on all 4 sides of the building, if you want, you know, I guess, but it's very different, of course. There is no vertical dimension. In the center, instead, is an atrium, a patio. But you see, I guess that kind of car he loved, because I read he actually loved red cars, red eccentric cars. And I think I have a picture, maybe with his own car. It's still a little different from Miss van der Rohe, although the reference to Miss van der Rohe is valid, is for all to see. But I would differentiate between the architecture of Miss van der Rohe and the one of Craig Ellwood. It's a different spirit. Although the architectural language has things in common with the one practiced by Mies. But I think even a superficial you know, reader of architecture, if I am to call that person so, would feel that this is not quite Mies. Certain elements are similar to Miss van der Rohe's architecture, others are not. Maybe these very walls, you know, misused them, but for a chapel at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and not so large. It's something a little bit different, but it's a good building. And you see, perfectly symmetrical, nothing wrong with symmetry, even for a building that is, you know, unquestionably modern through and through. Even by today's standards, this building stands out as being, you know, exquisitely modern, both inside and outside. Well, inside, yeah, there are a few pieces here that are rather dated. Craig Ellwood. A spectacular view now. Now the Temple of Steel, Daphne Residence, Craig Ellwood, designer. I don't know why it's called, well, I guess it used a lot of steel, but why it is called a temple? Maybe because, yeah, maybe that's why, because he used a lot of steel. Craig Ellwood. What is strange here, perhaps, look at these steps. You know, there is no podium here. There is no, you just open the door and the stairs begin, you know, the flowing, so to speak, right from the edge of the wall. The functionalists might protest, but maybe it's interesting. Again, many things go, you know, even things that Neufert might object to, many things go. And these are luxurious villas, of course, not, you know, it's not because of lack of money that he did so. It was a certain expressivity, architectural expression that he searched for. And I wouldn't mind living in this house, to be honest with you, even if I might risk my life when I, you know, try to get out from the house through these steps or whatever. I might fall, I might break a leg or two, but it's worth it, you know. Art requires sacrifices. So anyway, Craig Ellwood, he had a clientele that admired him, obviously, and he had plenty of works. The bridge house, this one is interesting. I like bridges in general, and but it was, I think, deserted or something happened to it. I know I saw pictures of students trying to, well, even emulate it with a similar structure somewhere else. This is the, you know, the conceptual drawing or the rendering of the house. He also built, believe it or not, a huge university building in the same way. This is a house. I guess he liked this, you know, the function of the bridge, you know, to unite, you know, the two sides of a rift through a structure. In this case of a house. This particular concept existed since 1964 and was obviously envisioned for a dramatic site. Ellwood associate Gerald Horn worked on the design and drawing above at Ellwood's request. It wasn't realized until Cole Poly students constructed it in 1968, 1968, 1967, 68. Ellwood had a long relationship with the school, including lectures and teaching. California Polytechnic, I guess, is called Poly, also houses his archives. A very interesting school. When I made the previous presentation, I showed some structures built by the students there. Very, very interesting. So I guess this was built based on the design or the drawings. Well, they were done not by him, but by this person, Gerald Horn, but at his request from his office, a bridge house. Nice. But it was, I don't know, abandoned or something happened to it. And nevertheless, the structure remains. And again, it was built by the students of California Polytechnical School, or called Poly, not by him. Now, earth-formed restrooms. Yes. In this presentation, I also, and I'm glad I have this because I can show a few buildings or structures that the students of the same school built themselves. So this has nothing to do with Craig Ellwood, or I think it does, or maybe some are, I don't know. I think they just build these experimental structures on the land of this school, California Polytechnical School. But interesting. This is a restroom. So why shouldn't a restroom also be architecture? It is, as you can see. The expressiveness of it is, yes, it was abandoned, vandalized, if you want, graffitis, but the power of architecture The spirit of architecture is still there. And there are others, you are going to see them. They are very, very interesting. An interesting school. The underground house from 1982 was actually underground at some point. It's not underground any longer, but I'm glad it's not, because it looks very enticing and interesting above the ground. Ah, the beauty of architecture. Yes, it is beautiful when it is playful, creative, crazy even a little bit. It has to be. It has to be. Otherwise, you know, we die of boredom. My God, we don't want that, do we? Look at this. You know, it's unique, it's interesting, it's a creation. Okay, it doesn't have to be too serious or too morosely serious. It's fine like this. Even the graffitis are interesting. You know, I'm sure future researchers, if they discover it, they will ask all kinds of esoteric questions about the meaning of these, you know, inscriptions on the walls. Stick structure, 1976, renovated in 2009. Again, the students built it. Nice, useless. It's a useless structure. It doesn't have a structure. It's just a stick structure. They built it with metallic sticks. The shell house. Look at this. Students built it. Maybe we should have just students build buildings, you know. Allow them to be so-called unknowing and irresponsible. We would have a very interesting world, no? Imagine, you know, thousands of irresponsible architecture students, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of irresponsible architecture students all over the world, building, expressing themselves with joy and playfulness. The exterior is the oldest structure still in the canyon. The roof was created by putting a center pole with cables hanging down, then shotcrete was sprayed onto a wire mesh that was welded onto the cables. The pole was then removed. That's the building. I think even that tree is happy, although the building is very close to it, but it's the cohabitation between nature or God and man. Look at this, even interior, the interiors, it's interesting, it's enticing, it's architecture. That's what it is. It is architecture, yes. The greenhouse, 1983, 1989. Can you believe it? Built by the students without Craig Ellwood, although his archive is there. A geodesic dome, 1957, and geodesic it is. I think Buckminster Fuller also taught here at this school, California Polytechnic. After a speech, you see, after a speech by Buckminster Fuller at Cal Poly in 1956, that is California Polytechnical School, a group of 5 architectural engineering students came together to build his patented geodesic dome. This was the first permanent dome of its kind in the Western United States. Let's look at it again. Again, built by passionate students. Bravo to them. We need more of them. Okay, the Fratesa Tower, 2004. This was, of course, built by the students on this campus. We are dealing with the works of Craig Ellwood. It's not really a tower, but it's still interesting. You see, these structures, which are mysterious in terms of their function, I think are stimulating for the imagination, for the eye. Poly Canyon. It's Poly Canyon, not, I thought it was Californian. I don't know why I saw an L. Here I see something else. Pathway to Poly Canyon, or maybe it is Californian Poly School, but here is also about a canyon from 1976. It's this is the name of this campus where we saw all these buildings, all these structures. It's also referred to as the Design Village of Architecture Graveyard. If this is a graveyard, I have to tell you, I didn't see anything morbid in it. I think it's actually more like a birth house than a graveyard. And here is the plan of the site with these structures built by the students. Okay, we move forward now to Craig Ellwood. But not yet. Experimental practices laboratory. I love this. Architecture has to be experimental. College of Architecture and Environmental Design, dedicated in 1963 by Dean George Hassan. This area is intended for full-scale experimentation by CAED students here. We seek to abolish the distance between theory, design, and construction. For the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them. I love this. I love this. Let's read this again. For the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them. Very nice. Very, very nice. Okay, esoteric survey, that's where I found this material. Maybe you are interested to make a note about this website and study further what these remarkably irresponsible creative students did. That's a Google map of the site. Now, Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and I was waiting to arrive at it, built by Craig Ellwood, and you'll be surprised because this building is, in a way, out of this world. You know, this man who never studied architecture was audacious enough, eccentric enough to build this huge bridge. I mean, look at this, and it's black, and it's wild in a way, although it is Cartesian. I hope I have a picture from the air. It's a rectangle. It's a rectangle. It's completely Cartesian, but in contrast with the relief, with nature, it becomes quite potent. Craig Ellwood, look at this. He built it. It's a university. It's almost utopia, no? Almost fantastic. He built it. Yes, you can do with right angles a rectangularity. Also, if you have a vision, a courageous vision, and like in this case, nature was, providing the drama, but then the building itself, in contrast with nature, amplified the drama. Excellent work. Look at the plan. It's very simple. But what is not simple is the nature is the place where it finds itself. The plans are, we know by now that Craig Ellwood was a great, seer, so to speak, in terms of organizing functions very clearly. And it shows here too, even if I don't know precisely what functions there are there, but I can imagine them. It's a school, it's a university, there are classrooms, there are, auditoriums and so on. I find the building refreshing, actually, in all its orthogonality. And I think it might be that this is his car under the Pasadena, I think, if that's what it is, if I remember correctly, the name of this college. I read it, I remember reading he loved red cars and rather, high-speed cars, eccentric cars. Architects in general like them. So it might be that this is the car of the author of this building. Thank you. I don't show his paintings, although I understood his last 20 years of his life or so, he painted a lot in Italy. He left the United States and went to Italy. And now we go to the last architect today, Edward Larrabee Barnes, also North American. These North Americans, they moved the world around that time. I don't know if they still do, but well, it's easier to interpret or understand the past than the present. as the great Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said, we must leap forward. We can only understand our lives looking backwards, but we must leap forward. So while you live, you can't truly understand what you are doing. It's only after the event that looking back, you might understand something, and maybe not even that. Anyway, Edward Larrabee Barnes, 1915-2004, he lived a long life, more than James Stirling and Craig Ellwood. This was the man, a good architect, a little bit severe, a little bit austere, but nothing wrong perhaps with a little bit of seriousness. So Edward Larrabee Barnes, as you see, born on April 22nd, was an American architect. He was born in Chicago, Illinois, into a family he described as incense-swinging high Episcopalians. Funny description, consisting of Cecil Barnes, a lawyer, and Margaret Helen Ayer, a recipient of a Pulitzer Prize for the novel Year of Grace. He graduated from Harvard in 1938 after studying English and art history. Before switching to architecture, then taught at his alma mater, Milton Academy, before returning to Harvard for further studies under Walter Gropius and Marcel Breuer. He graduated from the Harvard Graduate School of Design in 1942 and served in the Navy during World War II. After the war, he worked for Henry Dreyfus in Los Angeles, designing prototypes for mass-produced homes. He became very successful and built a lot. In 1949, Barnes founded Edward Larrabee Barnes Associates in Manhattan. During his long career, Barnes, with his wife Mary Barnes, as interior designer, designed office buildings, museums, botanical gardens, private houses, churches, schools, camps, colleges, campus planning, and housing. Many of his buildings are widely recognized, including the Dallas Museum of Art, Walker Art Center, and the IBM building at 590 Madison Avenue in Manhattan. This was the man. This is the man. He was chosen for the gold medal of the American Institute of Architecture in 2007. Yes. Here in the description we read something interesting. Barnes is remembered for using modernism and with vernacular architecture and understated design. That's not easy, you know, to unite modernism with the vernacular and to have an understated design. Apparently, he was able to do it. The visitor center at the Botanical Garden in Chicago, it could have easily been a temple or a church, easily. But this is the visitor center, the Botanical Garden in Chicago. My God, my God. Architecture can be indeed surprising sometimes. I mean, who would have thought that this is a visitor center? Old Stone Square. Well, it's a square. He built a building, you know, adjacent to the square, I guess, or maybe this is the name of the building and there is no square. I don't know. But I like it, you know, it's clearly based on the square and the cube, and it's almost Japanese somehow, particularly at the top. It has an austerity and a rigor that it's almost astonishing. Yeah, there is something Japanese about it. Not that I am an expert in Japanese architecture, but I did study it and I did make many presentations on Japanese architecture. There is something about it. The New South building in Princeton, as you can see, a very rigorous architect, at times austere, but this is architecture as well. It is. It's not just a building. It is architecture. It transcends. It transcends a house, actual house. Now it's a school of crafts there in Maine, a village of shingled cottages placed on the National Register of Historic Places. A big honor, and it's nice. It's a nice cluster of. Indeed, here we see the collaboration, if we are to call it so, between modernism and the vernacular. So it was a house made up of various fragments, and now it's like a village, or considered so. A small one, of course. I mean, a small village, but a rather larger house with various parts interconnected by patios and, terraces and so on. Not bad. Edward Larrabee Barnes. And the ocean is the ocean. Modest geometric signature. Barnes was noted for crisp geometric buildings in both rural and urban landscapes that didn't call attention to themselves, much like the architect himself. This is beautiful. This is beautiful because I think we need more modest architects in the world, and modesty doesn't make them less creative. So again, he created crisp geometric buildings in both rural and urban landscapes that didn't call attention to themselves, much like the architect himself. And here is a list of some of his works. We are going to go through some of them. So he received this prize of the AIA, the American Institute of Architecture, in 2007. So what we read was the remark of Toshiko Mori, a Japanese-American architect who was chair of the Department of Architecture at Harvard. She said, Barnes' work is held in high regard among architects internationally and is influential in reassessing both the contemporary and future models of architecture. It has a generous sense of proportion spatially, which is very different from precedent European models, imbued with his social and spiritual understanding of the cultural aspects of the program and his sympathetic and humanistic attitude as an architect. Very nice words. Crown Center in Kansas City, low-rise commercial office complex that handsomely shapes the cityscape, but no picture, sorry. Now this one, formerly known as the IBM building, 590 Madison Avenue, New York City, an elegant, nearly triangular tout giant with a bamboo court atrium epicenter. And the skyscraper it is. No one would dispute this. Rather astonishing now that this corner is cantilevered, considering the the volume above it. A sharply chiseled showcase of skyscraper angles on Lexington Avenue, again, skyscraper in Manhattan. The Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, a helical sequence of galleries known for its quiet elegance. You see a very strict, rigorous And this is interesting because this architecture could not have been really very understated, but somehow he was able to negotiate between monumentality, geometric rigor, big masses, but also, emanate a feeling of understatement. This is not easy to do. Edward Larrabee Barnes. And it is his birthday, just like the birthday of James Stirling and Craig Ellwood. The Dallas Museum of Art, a limestone composition of geometric forms that, while dominated by an imposing 40-foot high barrel vault, seems to recede before the works within it. Fortunately, also we have the art that brings in the otherness of color and a different geometry. Art is always necessary, I would say. The Dallas Museum of Art. Sober elegance. I guess we can use these words. Now, this is a judiciary building in Washington, D.C. with its dramatic 5-story glass atrium at its main entrance. Now, I don't think he did these buildings, or maybe I'm wrong, or maybe he was forced to assume a certain historicism because of the context of Washington, D.C., where it was placed. But inside here, the courtyard and the atrium and the covering of the atrium is thoroughly modern, as you can see. A lot of glass indeed, but again, at that time, glass was unquestioned and maybe even unquestionable. Today is a different story because we care about energy losses, we care about sustainability, the climate change, and so on. But at that time, there were no such concerns. Edward Larrabee Barnes. The Sarah M. Scaife Gallery at the Carnegie Institute in Pittsburgh, a light-filled space respected for its graciousness. An S is missing there. Let's these are the plans, but let's see a few images so we can perceive its gracefulness, for its grace. I hope I have better pictures. Now, the Knoxville Museum of Art in Tennessee. Again, it's interesting, this architect, because you have a clear symmetry here, and yet the building has. I mean, it is a rigid building, yes, but maybe because also of the playfulness with which he handled the chromatics of these opaque walls. I still see something, of an Oriental sensitivity here. That's why I mentioned earlier the Japanese architecture. I don't know what this thing is here. And yes, these walls are a good background for all kinds of visualizations. It's still the same Edward Larrabee Barnes, rigorous architecture, monumental, but at the same time, as it was stated by Mori, that Japanese architect Toshiko, I think Toshiko Mori, that it is still somehow understated, which is maybe some people would debate it, but even this building, I think, although it has a lot of opaque walls, opaqueness, and it is, you know, at least to an extent monumental because of the proportions, it's not overstated, it's not dwarfing, it's not oppressive. And was able also to, you know, become playful when needed, like with this stair here, which is not, you know, comfortably sitting against the wall. But he built many, many other buildings. This is just an introduction to his work, really. A long activity and quite successful. Barnes' museum designs seem to reflect his modest personality. In Barnes' own words, we are trying to create architecture that does not compete with art, to put the priorities in the right order. It is flow more than function that concerns us. There must be a sense of going somewhere like a river. At the same time, the architecture must be relatively uneventful and anonymous. That's it. Let's wish him happy birthday too. And that was it for today. Thank you for being here.